I'm Rochelle Wilhite, the designated broker of Best Choice Realty. Tonight, we are going to be covering multifamily and talking about a little bit of investors. And Shannon pulled me aside today and she's like, we have way too much content to cover in 30 minutes. This is a really good topic. So I'm glad you guys were able to jump on tonight. We certainly will have some additional training, and I'm very, very happy to have both lenders, Grace and Nancy, on the webinar tonight. Do you want to do the movement minute real quick?
Sure thing. I can jump on. Sorry, my camera's not working, but I'm here, I assure you. And we are just looking forward to, we're going to have our Q&A session with some valuable information this Wednesday at 10 o'clock, our monthly webinar on first-time home buyers and some down payment assistance programs. And so we're hoping that you can all join us.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. And I see the rates just keep going, inching up and up. But you know what, as they inch up and up though, Nancy, I mean, my phone's ringing more. So I think if you are thinking, things are going to get, going to go down or going up, I think just the movement of going up or going down, it actually is getting your phone to ring a lot more, at least from what I can tell. One of the agents I'm talking to. Is that what you guys are hearing as well?
Yeah, definitely. The Fed's going to stick where it's going to be, and I think the fact that the hope of rates dropping real quickly is getting out of people's minds, and they're realizing that it's still a good time to buy a home. With the opportunity to refinance. So yeah, I've definitely seen a little more activity. We just hope that we can help people. A lot of customers, if you were pre-qualified 6 months ago, got to make sure you take another look at it right now. Make sure you're all in the right range for everything still.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think Candace, we were talking earlier as well, and she's like, I'm seeing movement everywhere. There's so it's movement has really taken over as far as 1%, being the number one across the Pacific Northwest. And I think they're actually in Tri-Cities and Spokane as well. So we're excited about your growth as well as our growth. It's very much in alignment. So we're happy to have you guys as partners. Thanks
for so much.
So actually, one more thing. I don't know what you are talking about tonight, but Fannie Mae announced that last week, 2 to 4 units before the down payment requirement was 15 to 25%, but now they're going to lower that down to 5% starting November 18th. So that's actually going to change, a lot of things for us and, for the investors, for the first-time home buyer. I mean, and also there was always question. For the conventional loans, unless you did have a landlord experience, we could not use the future rental income. They're changing that too. So, you should be able to use, your future rental income up to 75% to use it as a qualified income. So, that is actually a game changer.
That is a game changer. That's maybe why my phone's ringing off the hook, because that is out there. But I don't think a lot of people know about that. So it'd be important to get the word out. Can you post something, Grace, on the closed group on Facebook for us? And that way we can get that word out. That would be great. Yes. On that type of thing.
All right.
I know Shannon's recording this call. So those of you who are listening afterwards, be sure to take a look at the recording and also the handouts that we have along with tonight. Thank you for that. Both of you ladies are wonderful. It's great to be working with true professionals. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So I've got some slides that we're going to cover, but we're really going to just have a conversation between Shannon and I. We've been dealing with a lot of questions from all of you with some of the lending changes, but also just how we develop the contracts, what you have to think about. And you think there's a lot, and there usually is. I mean, multi with that little I under, that's cute. It is kind of a different type of family type of situation. But we have duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. And then there are people that are actually looking for some sizable exchanges into more of apartment buildings, or maybe I do a commercial type of building rather than a fourplex or a duplex. So we have a lot of that type of movement right now, and it usually happens towards the end of the year. A lot of the investors start looking at their investment portfolio for the next year and then start making some decisions. So if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of share with you guys one of the emails that I received. And the opportunities are out there. They're out there for all of you. The subject line Maybe you got the same email, I don't know, but it says in the subject line, 1031 exchange, duplex, triplex, fourplex. My daughter and son-in-law sold a house in Everett. They want to buy a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. They would like to find one within the next 30 days. They have access to both MLS and SEBA. So that makes me wonder, like, what do they have access to? Of course, there's the MLS is pulling data to all of the websites that you guys are frequenting. But SEBA, you can see some things, but they do hold back a lot of information on SEBA. So that's kind of interesting that they have access to both those things, probably not so much the details. I'm going to assume they don't have the details, otherwise they wouldn't be asking me for information. But therefore, anything that shows up, they would have already have seen. However, they're contacting me for off-market opportunities. So this would be a great email if you needed to take this email, maybe craft your own as a way to communicate with maybe other brokers in the area. There are not very many opportunities for duplex, triplex, fourplex. In fact, most of the good stuff goes very, very quickly. The client actually gave us more information. They're non-contingent on financing. Obviously, they're doing a 1031 exchange. They live in Mercer Island. They've owned properties before. Again, this would be some sort of good language that I saw come across. I'm thinking, you know what? You could replace the cities with, say, Moses Lake. Or a different area that you cover. And this would be a great email that you could use as a template that would help you in getting more opportunities out there or kind of communicating about the type of situation you're handling. The opportunities are out there, though. I assure you, I've put all my brother's properties on the market right now. All of them are getting a lot of activity. So yes, we can do multifamily. If you have never done a multifamily, you are working with the best of the best. We have plenty of resources available to help you if it's your first time writing an offer for a multifamily, or you've never worked with a multifamily seller or buyer. You know, we are going to put it out there that we actually can do those types of opportunities, and we are doing a really good job at representing our investors right now. So fourplex or more, you're going to want to use a commercial purchase and sale agreement. That is what most lenders are going to require you to provide. If you did not, for some reason, put it on the right forms, they most likely will have you rewrite it so it is on a commercial form, because that's what the underwriters typically look for. So fourplex or more, make sure you're using a commercial PSA. We have those commercial purchase and sale agreements in Transaction Desk available for you to use. So it makes it easy for you to draft that contract and get support when you need it. If it's less than a fourplex, say it's a triplex, a duplex, you're going to use in Washington a Form 20. It's a different type of form that talks about different things. We'll go over that in a minute. And then if you're listing a multifamily, duplex, triplex, less than a fourplex, you're going to use a Form 15 for the input. So if you're trying to make sure you gather all the right forms, those are the forms in Washington that you're going to use. Kind of thinking about, well, I want it subject to, or I want to see the leases. Currently, you know, with my brother, he's wanting to see all of the leases when he's trading his single family into a duplex, when he moved his duplex into a triplex. He wants to see the copies of the leases and make it contingent on the review of those types of things. If they have not uploaded it as a supplement, you're going to want to include a lease review. And this would be if you're using the Form 20, you may want to use the 22L. If you're using commercial, you won't need a lease addendum or a lease contingency because it's already built in. The commercial lease review or the feasibility is already built into that commercial PSA. So those are kind of some keep in minds on the forms. Let's go to the next slide so I have time to cover everything. So where do I find all these opportunities? If I had a buyer who was looking to do a 1031 exchange, I would probably reach out to some other commercial brokers in the area where my brother is looking and just see what they have on the horizon. Many commercial opportunities do not get placed on the MLS. And so you really have to be connected with other commercial brokers in the area. It's what they call the good old boys club a lot of times. And it's less that way nowadays, but it's all about information. And so they do control that information and they gather that information and hold it close to the chest. So you do have to have enough knowledge to kind of get through some of the gatekeepers that exist out there. And so hopefully tonight we'll give you some ideas on how to talk the lingo and be able to converse with the commercial brokers that are out there so you can see what they have on the horizon. Off market is also a very, very good way to go if you were to get a list from, say, a title company. And by the way, a title company is not the same when you get a title report from, say, the big Chicago Title or Fidelity or First American. That's a different title policy for commercial. So you're going to want to talk with the commercial title rep rather than a residential title rep, so you can get that type of information. It takes longer to get the title reports on commercial. Could take you about a week rather than maybe a day, like most of the most of the title companies. It will take them less time in residential, more time in commercial to get that information for you. So give yourself some more time when you're dealing with commercial. But if you want to gather lists or opportunities that exist of property owners, maybe that are off market, you would be working with a commercial title officer, not maybe the type of title officer that you're working with in residential. Might be a different relationship that you're creating there. The other thing that some people will go to is they think LoopNet. Think of LoopNet as kind of like the Zillow of commercial. It will have a lot of data, but the data may not be as good and relevant because they're not regulated like the SEBA or the Northwest MLS or the MLS in Spokane or in Coeur d'Alene. So think of LoopNet as another resource that you could use, but it's not going to be the end all be all. You're going to want to certainly think about that a little bit differently and cross-reference that maybe with SEBA or MLS to see if it's truly off market or if it is on one of the MLSs. You can certainly build it. We have builders and developers that are currently licensed with Best Choice Realty. And when they have got in a situation where there is a lack of inventory, oftentimes what they will do is find land and then they will build a multifamily project. That is certainly an idea that might help you if you're thinking about a certain client and they have a budget to meet. You may have to go outside of the range. I know I just looked for a client that I have in Bellevue, and there's nothing that will work for my client that's under 4 million in Bellevue. That's a fourplex. It just doesn't exist. So if I've got to get my client to basically go outside of that small little area and find other opportunities and what they call opportunity zones that might be a better investment for my client. So then you can certainly build it. That might be an option that you may not have considered. And certainly SEBA and MLS. We are both licensed in the various MLSs across the state of Washington, as well as in North Idaho, and also members in good standing with SEBA. Not all brokers can keep the good standing with SEBA. They have a certain level of compliance. They make it the broker's responsibility to collect the fees, which we do, and we've maintained our good standing with SEBA. So if you are wanting your own SEBA membership and your own access, just like MLS, you would just need to sign a form and agree to pay a monthly fee to be a member of SEBA, and then you would have access to it in your home office. Unlike MLSs across the state where they have, you can only have your access, they do allow at SEBA to come into one of our offices and use our office account to search for properties. They do allow for that. However, if you're going to list a SEBA property or a commercial property, if you don't have SEBA membership, you would be listing the listing under a SEBA member or under my MLS information on SEBA. So those are the opportunities that you have access to. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Shannon because I'm talking too fast. So I want her to slow us down a little bit and talk about some of the things she's encountered with the tenancy situation and some things to keep in mind, because these are all very, very important points that we want to keep in mind when we're handling clients that are dealing with multifamily. So I would turn it over to her.
So this is kind of a meaty visual. I know for some of those that are maybe on their phone, you're gonna have to scroll in for some of these, but some of the things that are on here, I mean, this is all fresh off of my mind of working with a duplex and a triplex in our market area. And this is kind of what you're going to be dealing with. So it's like getting ahead of a lot of the paperwork and what you're to expect. So you can kind of prep property managers, you can prep the sellers, and as well as the tenants if it's pertinent. So one of the big things that it's important for you to know before you've listed a property, but also as you're kind of investigating for buyers and sellers, is to make sure you have a good understanding of the value of the rents and also the terms that the renters are under. So Having a month-to-month lease agreement is going to be very different than someone who has a year-long contract as a tenant. So I have a property, for instance, that they have two different types of situations. They got one that's month to month and they have one that's a year. Well, that's going to be very different when you're looking at it as an investor. If it's a duplex, I mean, that makes it very easy to basically vacate one side, and then they know that they can't really mess with the one on the right. Market value rents is one that I think is, if you're preparing a property for the market, if you have your own investment properties that are in the area, you're going to want to take a very hard look at what you're looking at in terms of what those values of those rents are. It's going to be harder to sell a triplex, a duplex, a fourplex if you are charging under market value rents. When you're talking about investors, it's all about the dollars and cents. It's not personal at all. And so when you're looking at a rental situation where they're charging $1,500 a month versus what they should be charging, which is closer to $2,500 a month, they're going to be evicting those tenants, or they're going to be jacking the rates up heavily afterwards, which will displace people after the course of that. So a lot of the tenants, you'd be surprised, are actually they're okay and they're expecting rents to rise, especially when you're talking about putting homes on the market and things like that. So, give the seller, if it's a seller of yours, give them an update and say, hey, you may want to just do an assessment of what the market value rents of that unit could be, to make sure that you're in line, so that it'll actually, the numbers will crunch out for the next homeowner. One of the other kind of considerations is ease of availability for the showings. So properties are only going to turn as fast as they're able to get shown. So one of the things I know that Rochelle and I were kind of scratching our head about is we had a property that is incredibly difficult to show. We've got tenants that do not want people through the house. They do not want to be displaced with the sale of the home. They can't buy it, but they don't want to be displaced. One of the things you're dealing with tenants is you have to have 48 hours notice to show. What's crazy is there's a lot of agents out there that do not know about this. And they think, oh, I'm just going to submit a showing request through showing time for later tonight. Well, that's not going to work when you have a tenant that's in the home. You have to give them notice. So as a buyer's agent, I think being very flexible about the showings is going to be important. But then also as the seller, maybe can we block out a weekend where we can give the tenants a gift card, have them go to, book them an Airbnb or do something to get them out of the house for a period of time, so that you can have some showings blocked off for a period of time. Get creative about it, but you have to work with the tenants, because obviously they have tenant rights in the state of Washington. To showing time or not to showing time, when you're dealing with tenants, especially for duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, you've got several different units. Some of the things that you'll see for some of the landlords is that they'll have maybe one of the units is it's vacant. Let's have that one be the showing unit, maybe that's an option you can do. If you've got one of the tenants that's easier to work with another, let's see if they can accommodate, during certain times. Showing time is going to be tricky when you're dealing with tenants. So sometimes just picking one of the units is going to be easier than none of them at all. Sometimes it's easier just to take it off showing time. It just will be. When you have a couple different properties you're dealing with, a lot of agents that are doing commercial, or they don't want to do showing time. So just take it offline, call the listing agent, schedule the showing, get a little bit more information while you're at it, and you'll get a little bit easier and more information about that property. It's not uncommon to have this. It's funny. A lot of agents don't know this, but it's not uncommon for showings and inspections to be done after mutual acceptance. Even the MLS sometimes gets caught up on this sometimes, but you can submit an offer, and it's actually it's not uncommon to be submitting offers on properties that are multifamily, and make it basically inspection is after mutual acceptance. You see that all the time. So don't be surprised if you see that out in the field. In terms of paperwork, if you're prepping a listing or if you're representing a buyer, these are some of the kind of the things you're going to want to keep in mind of. Oh, what's on the screen here on the left-hand side is a copy of what escrow actually will ask a seller to fill out. once they're pending. So I suppose just kind of get yourself ahead of the game here. Ask the seller for copies of all of the active leases for the units they're in. Make sure that they're currently in the landlord's name. You'd be surprised, there's a lot of landlords out there that are doing it themselves. And when they do it themselves, you know, they're not up to date on how you run a property as like a property manager would. So having an active lease with their name on the property with the tenant will be important to have. So get ahead of that. If there's any sort of notices about increase of rents from the original lease agreement that they had with that tenant, basically anything that made that change from when they originally had a lease. I was looking at one yesterday. The guy had been in the house for 15 years. You know, from when he started, I think he was paying like $500 a month. Well, now the rents are going to be closer to 16 or 17 or whatever. You know, you're going to want to make sure that you can back that up with the paperwork to pass on to the next homeowner. The tenant's contact information will be helpful to have because you're going to have to pass that along as well. And also for showing purposes, you're going to want to make sure you get that ahead of the game. Utilities is important as well. I've got a visual I'll show you on the next slide. Every multifamily landlords will handle it differently. Sometimes utilities are put in tenant's name, sometimes they're not. So having an idea of what those rents are including will be important. Do the utilities include water, garbage, landscaping, or do they not? You know, like, let's get an idea of what those utilities include. If there's any sort of service agreements for the property, some people will do landscaping, they'll use property management, you know, that what type of agreements do you have to run that property? That'll be important for the next homeowner to have copies of, so they can either pick up service or they can have an understanding of what that service entails and decide, no, let's go another direction, let's shop it, whatever. And then obviously the visual here I showed you from escrow is having a clear log of what those rents and security deposits are. So that way escrow can handle the transfer of monies. Notices to vacate. It's going to have to be a provision of the sale, unless I'm wrong, right, Rochelle? It has to be dictated by the sale, but just be prepared that it's not uncommon to have notices of to vacate to tenants during the course of the transaction and also subsequently after. So with financing, did you want to pipe in a little bit here, Rochelle?
Yeah, this is pretty simple. So a lot of people ask me, well, okay, so I've never done a commercial or I've never done a multifamily before. How do I do it? And I've even caught appraisers that are doing it wrong and giving improper advice. So you definitely want to calculate all of the things and collect all of the information Shannon said earlier. But you're going to do a comparative market analysis based on sales, and you can actually go back in time with multifamily. Whereas, you know, if you're just dealing with a residential, you tend to keep it, you know, recent, you know, under 180 days, I think is the default in most CMA, you know, calculators. But with commercial or with multifamily, you can actually go back in time, and then you can apply different types of, you know, gross rent multipliers and things of that nature to get the valuation done correctly. So it's a longer class, but as far as I'm concerned, you do want to, for multifamily, use a comparative market analysis and try to find like kind properties within the similar type of area, a market area. When we talk about market area, it could be the whole city of Puyallup, for example, whereas a residential, it might be only around Shaw Road, if you know Puyallup well. So, I mean, commercial, you can go a little bit wider in distance, what they call market area, and you can certainly compare a longer timeline when it comes to the commercial adjustments that are being made. We can get into the nitty gritty if you have a specific valuation that you're trying to come up with, and I can give you some advice. Or you can simply pay for a commercial appraiser to go out there and appraise a property and do that ahead of time. So sometimes that can be done. And that is an idea that's worked with some very, very sophisticated sellers, I would say, with larger projects. If you maybe don't have the time or the ability to do that, you may want to suggest that that just be done. And then you handle the marketing, where somebody like a commercial appraiser would handle that. Oftentimes the seller on a commercial property on a multifamily will pretty much know what they want based on an exchange they're doing or their portfolio, or they've been counseled by their CPA or their attorney to list at a certain price. So oftentimes there's less valuations that I have to do, but more marketing and providing the data to our peers and then getting the word out about the opportunity. So there are FHA conventional cash. The terms have changed, so you may want to reach out to your lender and talk with your lender about what has changed when it comes to multifamily, so you understand what you're marketing to. But there's been more opportunities, but also some things that have changed. So get with your lender and go over the opportunities there.
Yeah.
1031 exchanges are going to be, they have a certain period of time where like our brother has to sell his property, and then he will have to identify what he's going to be exchanging it to. It has to be either the like kind or more expensive. And so a lot of times with the 1031 exchanges, great opportunities for realtors like us to go ahead and find and increase our clients' portfolio, and also help them in getting bigger, better properties that will actually cash flow in different ways. So love 1031 exchange, but there also is classes of just strictly on the 1031 exchange that you may want to familiarize yourself with. And then common call outs, Shannon, why don't you go through and discuss that?
So some of the stuff that typical, like you would expect with any type of residential property, it's the carbon monoxide detectors, water straps, but some of the other stuff too. A lot of these landlords, obviously, they're not living in the house, so they don't know a lot of the ins and outs necessarily of the house and how it's run and things like that. So some of these properties have been occupied for a long time. And so just making sure that, the appraiser, when they're going to call stuff out, it's usually going to be a roof, there's going to be electrical panels, it's going to be any sort of like of the fixtures of the house, just the long-term maintenance stuff. A lot of the investors are not going to care about the nitty-gritty stuff. They're not going to care too much about the carpet or the cabinetry and things like that. They don't necessarily look at it that way. They're looking more about the big stuff, which is, roof, electrical panels, plumbing leaks, things of that nature.
Okay.
This is one, actually, I pulled this actually from a recent property, but just log your communication with the other side of the sale. So this is an agent. He actually did a very good job about asking for documentation. He's like, hey, per the purchase and sale agreement, it's asking for books and records, leases, agreements, all the things. And he's super cute. And he was asking like, oh, he's been in the business over 20 years, but I'm doing my due diligence kind of thing. So he attached this, and this was responded to in a very subsequent, there's a clear log. So if ever there's a question later down the road, if ever anything were to get snatched up into legal, at least there was a clear communication and log of things being responded to. And all of the rents and deposits, as much as our knowledge was, everything was truthful and shouldn't have any sort of problem there.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job in representing his buyer. We certainly represented the seller on this one. So there's a fair exchange of information. Please, you guys, I see too many text messages, especially when we're dealing with multifamily, with which unit has an issue versus which unit. It's much, much easier to keep that all in an email. Please don't go and start texting a bunch when you're dealing with commercial or you're dealing with multifamily.
Yeah.
Let's make sure it's an email.
And when it comes to the listing of the property too, so I'm just we're going to breeze through because I know we're almost at the end of the hour here. But when you're listing properties that are multifamily in Washington, they allow you to double list properties. So especially if you're looking at something that's like a duplex, where sometimes first-time home buyers can take advantage of the FHA for those types of properties and live on one side, rent the other, or there's an ADU or a dadu in the back. Double list it when you can. They'll charge you $50 in the Northwest MLS to do it. But sometimes it's well worth it for the extra eyeballs that will come across there. And sometimes it just makes sense. It's like I was talking with an agent today, they have a duplex that they're putting on, 3-bedroom, 2-bath on one side, 3-bedroom, 2-bath on the other side. And she's like, if I were to list this under residential, like they're telling me to, it would look like it's a 6-bedroom house. That doesn't really make sense. So she ended up doing a double list, makes a lot more sense. She's done, and just make sure she put it in the marketing remarks. And then she's kind of off to the races there. SEBA can help you too. So if you're looking at something that's like a fourplex, triplex, I mean, some of that stuff could be inputted into SEBA, with the information that you know about the property, just to get, again, more eyeballs on that type of listing. Knowing the lingo too. So some of the stuff that the investors are looking for in the marketing remarks, they don't care about the fluff, they care about the numbers. So just give them what they want, which they want to know. When were the improvements done? If one of the units was renovated in 2017, just say it was, the kitchen was renovated in 2017, new appliances in 2020, new roof in this year. Just give them exactly those types of numbers, because then they're running calculations in their head. Okay, the roof has 10 years left. The roof has this much left.
But Shannon, just so
that's
you know, I mean, I would say that a lot of the commercial brokers that you're competing with out there, they don't do a good job of marketing. So if you're representing a buyer who's looking, this might be, if you use this bullet point list you've got here, these might be some of your bullet points you ask the listing agent, or you email them. Hey, I'm really interested. I've got a serious buyer who's looking to do a 1031 exchange. Could you tell me more about MLS number such and such? What improvements were done this year? Or what is new? I can't really tell from the pictures. I mean, I've been there. I mean, I don't really care about the pictures, because my brother just wants to list the property and he's got this much rent and he's ready to check out and move to a different country. So in that circumstance, I'm going to know a lot, but unfortunately I don't have photos that can show all of these things. So it's going to take an exchange of communication to be able to, I guess, properly market it and get what the parties need.
Yeah, and speaking about photos too, when you have tenants, sometimes they're just uncomfortable about having pictures of their stuff put online.
Yeah.
So sometimes these multifamily duplex, triplex, they're not going to have great photos. You have to kind of be okay with that. And it's all about, let's submit the offer and we'll review things after inspection, and things like that. They're going to be important for your buyers.
But you're going to laundry is important. I think
Yep.
every multifamily, I've talked to investors and like, gosh, I can't believe you're getting that for rent. Well, it's because we made life better for that particular person. We put laundry. So we went ahead and invested on the triplex, for example, and put washer and dryers in all 3 of the units. It did not have washer and dryers before. So those types of things, when you solve people's problems, all of a sudden you can get more in rent. Or you can make somebody's life a little easier, or you can help where you're having trouble keeping a renter. You got to think about the laundry and the parking situation. That seems to be the hot buttons.
Parking's huge, especially in King County. If you're dealing with something over there, or any sort of downtown area for that matter, people care a lot about the parking and the walkability of the units. I've got one of our agencies got, it's bigger than a fourplex, but they have a garage. And so that's a huge amenity to have in that specific little area. So does that going to affect your market value rents and what you can potentially turn that property for? You can kind of make the determination from there. Walkability is huge, for especially if you've got something that's in some sort of metropolitan area. Landlords are going to care a lot about the walkability, just because they give them options. I mean, there's shared housing types of things that people are doing right now. So they're looking at things from the national standpoint. They go, okay, I know Seattle, I know, Spokane, I know Tri-Cities, but I don't really know they're looking at the walk scores to kind of determine, what they can do potentially with that property. We already kind of mentioned the rental situation, 1-year agreements versus month to month. If it's kind of in shabby shape, having a month-to-month agreement is actually going to be really good for that next investor, because they can potentially, move them out and then improve the unit and then list it for rental later. Cap rates and vacancy rates are going to be important to know. The Northwest MLS does a pretty good job of giving you like instructions on what to do, but that's the stuff that the investors care about, is the cap rate. So thanks, Patty, for obviously piping in on that. And vacancy rate too, knowing that there's not been any sort of vacancies in those properties. It's good to know, for an investor that may be overseas or out of state or anything like that, knowing what the individual market rents are doing for that area is important.
I think that's it.
I know we went over by a little bit, so thanks you guys. But yeah, there's multifamily projects that are coming out right now, so let's make the most of the situation.
I think the biggest takeaway if I could say one last thing before we wrap, would be, there are people that are a little hesitant to do something, and it takes a prompting by a professional to say, here's what's going on right now. Here's what we know. And prices are in our area, at least in Washington and North Idaho, they're holding pretty steady. I mean, and so I guess what are we waiting for next year? And just kind of having that really candid conversation with some of your investors and showing them the numbers, showing them what their investment has done over the period of 3 years, 4 years, however long, showing them how much they've made in the last 3-4 years, and saying what's holding us back from basically doing an exchange and getting something maybe that's a bit more viable for you, or a little bit more in your wheelhouse. You know, the kids have changed. I know from our fact, when we talked with my brother, I mean, his kids are getting to the point where they're going to be going to college. So this investment that he's been building over the last 5 to 10 years has been something that is going to grow, and he's going to just turn it into something that's less property management and more where he's more passive, where he's getting passive income in his retirement years. So it can be done, but you got to have the conversation, because I can tell you right now, a lot of your investors are just kind of waiting around, not getting ahead of what's on the horizon. And by you making that phone call and just telling them about 1031 exchanges, or that you have the ability to place their listing on multiple MLSs or on a commercial MLS to get them more exposure, all of a sudden you're opening doors and creating opportunity where they may not know. So I think that's what I wanted to share with all of you. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, you know how to reach us. Thanks, Santoso, for the feedback. We appreciate it. We'll go ahead and continue on with the discussion next month and next week. We have a really good topic scheduled for the next few weeks. Getting us all prepared for the new forms that are coming out, buyer service agreements, our listing agreements, getting another little adjustment. I think you guys are going to be very happy with the adjustments, though, that we're making. It'll make less paperwork for you. And across the board from Washington to Idaho, I think you guys will be very pleased with some of the things we're doing. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you next Monday.